Hello there. So I wanted to introduce Adjunct Professor Michelle Harris, who teaches English, and she is going to take us through how important English is, which you think would be very basic, but there's actually a lot more to it than you may realize, more than what the eye sees. As a matter of fact, I call her the portal keeper just because she opens our minds to totally different ways of seeing things. Well, here's the interview, and I hope you enjoy it. Welcome, everyone. The Chronicles of a Mile High City Nomads. CMHC Nomad myself, John Ross, and welcome back. I have a very special friend with me. This is Adjunct Professor Michelle Harris.
Hi.
So this is a very, very awesome individual here in the Chicago metropolitan area, and she's going to explain to us as to how she went from anthropology to teaching. So for starters, your bachelor's in anthropology, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so how did you go from, and then your master's is in?
Applied linguistics with a focus on teaching English as a second language.
So how'd you go from anthropology to linguistics?
So very interesting story.
I got questions.
So when I first started college, I always wanted to be a teacher, but I ended up wanting to teach physics and astronomy. So I was very interested in outer space and planets and stars and things like that. So I wanted to teach that. However, once I started taking those type of classes, I realized that that was better suited as more of a hobby and not actually teach that. So as I was taking my general education courses, I ended up happening upon an anthropology class. And I loved it so much that I decided to major in it. And for people who don't know, anthropology is like the study of human beings in general. So that means diet, that means culture, biology, society. So it encompasses a lot of different things. And one of the aspects that I took a class in as well as linguistics. So that's about the study of like languages, how they form, the patterns in languages, and how they are used to communicate with people, written, spoken, all of those things. So I took that class and I was really intrigued by it and I really liked it. So that's how I ended up getting into linguistics and teaching English.
Now, you studied nonverbal communication as well?
Yes, we did study a lot of nonverbal communication, like especially for people who cannot produce spoken sounds, like, those who are deaf, hard of hearing, who may be blind, but some of them do have like those speech issues, is very important. Like for them, that's how they communicate with nonverbal communication. Like there's whole languages, lots of literature written about nonverbal languages.
One of my more polemical views is I think that American Sign Language should be mandatory for everybody, not just schools for the deaf. That's my personal opinion.
And you know what? That's interesting that you talked about that, because in my English class, we actually studied sign language this semester towards the end, and I did put that question to them about American Sign Language, because a lot of them were not given that option. Now, some high schools offer that as a foreign language elective. So instead of taking like Spanish, French, German, Mandarin, and Chinese, you can actually take American Sign Language as your foreign language, and it will fulfill the requirement. A lot of high schools don't do it, but you're seeing more and more colleges do it. One of the community colleges that I work with actually has this course where you can take American Sign Language, and that can be your foreign language requirement.
If I could have had the opportunity, I would have taken both Spanish and American Sign Language.
I thought it was very nice. They have a hybrid version where you can come to class one day and then do the rest online. They have a completely online version. The class is very interesting. It's very cool. So, but my students also share the same feelings as you, as they wish that would have been an option for you. A lot of them, they knew about sign language, but they didn't know, the depths of it or how important it is, because they were, they're used to being speaking all the time, and they did not understand like how much of communication is nonverbal. Like most of communication is nonverbal.
Yeah, that's very true. Even with those of us the vast majority of us who do here, it's mostly nonverbal.
Yes, it's mostly nonverbal communication. I'm going to say, I'm not sure, but I'm going to say upwards of 90% of communication is nonverbal.
That's true. It's like upwards of 90%. So, aside from that, do you teach English literature, or do you teach ESL, or do you do both?
So really, I teach ESL, so English as a second language, and I also teach like the first year writing program. So like for university students who are freshmen and sophomores, I teach the first year writing component, which is like an English class. We do read and do literature in there. Some things we do go into a depth, so it's like a hybrid kind of class. The first year program is not like a basic like literature class. It encompasses like literature, reading, writing, and critical thinking, and also speaking as well.
So when you're going through this course and you're trying to kind of teach people the idiosyncrasies of the language, what are some things that you keep in mind?
So I keep in mind, I like to always tell the students, whether they're whether they're my composition students in my first year writing program, or if they're my ESL students, like the first day of class, I tell them, look, this is, I picture myself as a guide. We are going on a hike, so picture us going on a hike or on a boat. We have a guide. So when you go hiking in the woods or on a tour or something, you have a guide, right? Can the guide take the tour for you?
Well, can you protect us against the bears?
Right.
The bears, the wolves.
So if the bear is by you, how can I protect you? You have to protect yourself, right? I can give you the tools to protect yourself, but I can't protect you.
She's gonna leave us in the woods with Mr. Bear.
But yeah, so that's why I said I can't take the journey for you. I can only give you the tools that you need, and I can be your guide to get you to where you need to be. But I can't physically take the journey for you, and you have to do that. And that's how you need to think about your educational career, not just this class, but anything. The teacher cannot open your head and pour their knowledge into yours, okay? It would be very fantastic and great if that was possible, but we know that is not. So you have to take this journey yourself with your teacher's help.
Well, you can at least give us bear spray.
Yeah, okay, you can have bear spray. That's part of the tools I give you, the bear spray. Because if the bear is in the back, I'm in the front, I can't help you.
I really like that way of thinking, is that, it's like you're the guide. You can't walk there for them. They still have to walk with you.
Yes.
And so it really puts a lot of accountability on the individual to make sure that they can at least walk that hike as well.
Right.
And how do your students normally respond to that?
They're very positive about it. They're usually like, I really did not think about it like that because, depending on what school system they came from, a lot of my students are not Americans. So they're not American students. So a lot of my students are English language learners, or they're students who are immigrants, or their parents are immigrants. So they may be a first or second generation immigrant here. So a lot of them, they had schooling in another country. So, the school system is different, and they never thought about it that way because the teacher never explained it to them like that, right?
But what languages do they come from?
So I have students who've come from, I have students who are native Chinese speakers. I have lots of native Spanish speakers, Slavic languages like Polish, Russian. And this year, first ever, I had 2 students who are from Macedonia. So,
Macedonia?
Yes, 2 Macedonian students, first time ever. In all of my years of teaching, even student teaching, I've never had students from Macedonia who are native Macedonian speakers, but those 2, I had 2 this
Okay, wait, time out. I've met Macedonian people before, so I'm not that far gone, but what does the Macedonian language sound like?
So I did ask. I did ask my student. I was like, "What exactly is Macedonian?" And he explained it as a mixture of the some of those Slavic languages like Russian and Polish, mixed with like some Greek and maybe some Italian. So it's like a mixture of all of those, and how it sounds when it's being spoken.
Oh, for those of you who might not know from a more cultural standpoint, if you look at the UN, Macedonia, their entire name is spelled out, which is unusual because normally you have like USA, you have China, you have Russia, you have Turkey, like they just have the basic names. Macedonia is one of the few countries where they spell the entire name out. And that's because Macedonia in Greece is locked in a bit of a row over that name, Macedonia, because they both claim Alexander the Great, who he's taught as a Greek person when he was from Macedonia. So it's a little bit of an interesting dynamic, if you will.
Yes, it is. And this is the first time I've ever had students from there, especially being a native speaker of Macedonia. So it was very interesting to have them in the class.
So in terms of linguistics, like, do you speak any other languages yourself?
Yes, I do, but not very. I am not fluent by any means. I'm a much better reader and writer in those languages than I am a speaker, but I do know French. I studied that in high school and college for many years, and I still study it to this day. Spanish I recently picked up last year, and Latin as well. I'm much better at reading the Latin than speaking it. Some of the Latin stuff, if you hear it, it sounds like it's going to open portals to other worlds, and your furniture is going to start flying. So, so it does sound very interesting.
Well, and that's kind of like what I was talking about before. Was like when you learn a language, it's like a whole portal opens to you.
Yes, it is.
And it's like on the base, you can study science or technology or this and that and the other, but you have to start from the base language.
Yes, you do.
So how do you feel as kind of like that portal keeper?
That's an interesting question. How do I really feel about that? I think it's a heavy job and it's a hard job, but I feel like someone has to do it, and why not me? Learning things has always been pretty easy to me. Going to school and things like that has always come very easily to me. So I feel that since I love learning and I have this passion for learning things, that it's only fair for me to share that with other people.
I'm sure if you ever went to the same high school as me, I was in an international baccalaureate program. Our hardest class was actually English. It wasn't biology, it wasn't chemistry, it was our English class, because she just made it extremely hard. Although I'm sure if we had you as our English teacher, that would be a totally different conversation. I learned quite a bit, so shout out to that teacher, but I would have much if you were my teacher, I think I would have learned a lot more in class. Just throwing that out there.
But yeah, from my students, I do get that depending on what language they're coming from. But English is very difficult for them to learn because English has so many exceptions.
Oh, yeah.
We have so many exceptions that the rules almost don't matter. Because there's so many exceptions to the rules. We have so many weird deviations from spelling. The spelling is weird for some words. The pronunciation is weird. So it does not follow a lot of the patterns that their languages follow. So that's why some students have a hard time with it and others do not. Also our alphabet. So if you're coming from a language that has that Phoenician alphabet that has A, B, C, those letters, versus someone who's coming from one who has the characters, or they don't have that, like someone who's coming from China or who's coming from the Middle East who have those different languages, it's very, very hard for them because they're not used to that type of alphabet. And the pronunciation is also different as well. So,
and also the way that you read, because
yes, they read from the opposite direction that we read.
So it's like a major paradigm shift. So if you do encounter somebody who speaks English as a second language, have patience, have mercy, because it was convoluted for us, even as native speakers learning the language.
Yes, and I tell them that. I was like, yes, I understand what you're going through because I learned the language too. So I understand, I feel your pain. Now maybe, I wasn't learning it at your age or under these conditions, but I understand because I had to go through the same thing too. I actually wish I learned it earlier because it's easier to learn the languages when you're younger, but it's not impossible for you to learn it as an adult or teenager.
Very much true.
Yeah.
So I do have a curious question though. As you know, I'm graduating from the School of Public Health next week.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you. Long time coming, well, 9 months, but how does English really, or at least English classes, how does that tie into public health in your opinion?
So for a lot of the students, especially for my ESL students, a lot of them have families who are in other countries. And for them, especially with this COVID situation going on, for them, knowing English is a way to communicate what's happening in the United States versus what's happening in their own country, because we know the response has been different in other countries. to the pandemic. So it's a way for them to not only communicate with them, but just simple things as like if they needed to go and get a test, how can they communicate with the pharmacist or the doctor? How can they take their kids to go get tested so that they can go back to school? How can they tell people that they have the virus, that they tested positive, and what are they supposed to do about work? What are they supposed to do about school? So just those things like that we take for granted, very important for them.
Wow. So would you say that the United States is kind of like the world's news broadcaster?
I would say more so, it's not the United States. I would say it's the language. It's English.
It's English.
It's English because if you look at other countries, English is a very important language in a lot of countries, especially if you want to have certain jobs or be in certain fields. If you want to be a business person, if you want to be a scientist, doctor, stuff like that, you almost need English. You're going to have to learn English. And also a lot of countries actually start having their students learn English when they're in like the second or third grade, and it's a required second language. You don't get to pick a choice. Here we get to pick. Some countries do not allow that. English is your second language. That's what it is.
Well, and that's interesting you mention that because I used to be an ESL teacher as well, and I taught I was a substitute teacher in Oklahoma, but I taught as a foreign English trainer in both Taiwan and Beijing, and I answer it that way for a certain reason. That's a subject of another video, but I will look at some of the Facebook postings of one of my teachers, and I corresponded with her, and she said, well, English actually helps us a lot when it comes to earning opportunities. That's in Taiwan, and I'm sure that's even in the mainland China, but also when it comes to the international dating scene, like, the romance stores and stuff like that, like Ukraine especially. There are women who are educated in economics, physics, chemistry, and heavy duty subjects, and yet they will leave that just to learn English and be in the international dating business, just because there's so much money in it.
Right. Yeah. So it does open up opportunities. I have students right now in my ESL class. One has a degree in microbiology. I've had doctors. I have a mechanical engineer.
Shout out to mechanical engineers.
And I have a lady who's a dentist. So they have these high-powered jobs in their home country, and then they come here and they're like, oh, I want to do my same job here for a lot more money, obviously. But I can't because I have this language barrier and they won't hire me until I get this straight. So for them, the stakes are very high because if you've taken the time to do that high-powered degree in your country, you don't want to start all over the bottom here, especially with the cost of our tuition here.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is, there are certain schools where, and I know like France comes to mind, but there are certain countries where their degree will transfer over if they pass the international English train. What is the test? So
they have two different ones. They have an IELTS test. And then they have the TOEFL. So usually the TOEFL is usually used here for admittance into like college and things like that.
What do those acronyms mean?
So the IELTS mean the International English Language Skills Test. So that's the IELTS, and then TOEFL, the test of English as a foreign language. So that means you're learning English in another country where it's not the main language spoken. But the TOEFL, that is the one that is like the gold standard for students to be able to get the job and also apply to any certificate program or college or anything like that. If they get a high enough score on that, then they will be able to granted access into those programs and those jobs.
Wow. So, I mean, then even if you're trying to be a citizen of Canada, even if you're an American, you have to take the IELTS.
Yeah.
So even if you're a native speaker, they still require it.
Yes. So yeah, if you are a non-native English speaker, which is what they call it, you have to take an English test. You have to take one for any type of program that you want to, and for a job too. I think a lot of the jobs require, especially if you need sponsorship, they require that English language requirement test. They want to see how well it is, and they insist their English is not good enough. They're blocked from having those opportunities.
So as we see that our time is winding down, there's a couple of questions I want to ask you before we close out. One thing is, let's just say that I come to this country, or maybe I'm an American and I just sponsored someone and they want some place to work on their English. So what would be some good resources for them to go to learn English as a second language?
So the first and foremost place I would tell them to go is make use of the community colleges. So community colleges are places that offer free ESL classes. They have lots of them around the city, or whatever city you're in, whatever town. They have lots of free classes for ESL. They have a GED as well if you want to get an American high school diploma, and those classes are free. So I would say start there. And after you get, your English proficiency to a high enough level, if they want to actually work or have a job here, encourage them to take some transition classes, like maybe take a certificate program or transition to a associate's degree. In those programs, they're grant funded programs, so they get money from the state to offer those classes for free. So if they work with it's free. So if you work with the counselors in those programs, they will help you apply to college if you want to. They'll help you find jobs. They'll help you apply to certificate programs. And a lot of them also have scholarships as well to help students who do not qualify for financial aid and things like that.
Yeah, and the thing is, and especially here in the Chicago metropolitan area, the third largest metro area in the country, there's a lot of resources here.
Yes, there's lots of resources. You could, if you have more money to spare, you could also take intensive English classes. So those are specifically for students who really need to move up fast, or if they really want to go to college sooner rather than later. And those are paid classes, but they are English classes. They're very intense. You have about 12 to 16 hours of classes a week, like you're going to a regular college program. You have homework and all of those things. So that's another option. Another option, private tutoring. There's lots of private ESL tutoring that you can get, but I would say start with the free resources first. That way you get a feel for it. Some people who've come here have been out of school for many years, haven't been to school since 7th, 8th, 9th grade. So they may need to ease back in there. They may, yes, going straight to an intensive English program may be overwhelming for them. So that's why I say start small first, and then if you feel that you need to advance, then advance.
All right. And then my last question, because you've been very gracious with your time. If people want to contact you for further questions, what is the best way to reach you?
So the best way to reach me is they can find me on Facebook. So my Facebook is very easy name, Michelle Harris. You may not find me, but try anyway.
It'll be in the comments. It'll be in the comment section below.
And then also I do have an Instagram page as well, Miss M Harris. So again, it'll be linked in there. So if you have any questions or want any information, I'm happy to help you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
And that really wraps us up. Again, in the description, I'll have that information that you mentioned. And before I close out, in the words of Sun Tzu, always strive to advance your position. Thank you very much for joining us, and you have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye.